So is that everything you hoped for?
Can't be any worse out there. Can it?
Once upon a time, I had somebody that I cared about. And in this world, that's good for one thing. Get you killed.
I can take care of myself.
How many close calls have we had?
I get into trouble down there. You make every shot count.
I got this.
Hope you know how to use that thing.
I've had some practice.
Oh my god, it's 96 degrees. It really is making me feel like I am one of the last of us, because if the clickers don't kill me, the heat will. Holy shit. It's about to be 100 degrees. I'm sorry, people, but yeah, if you hear me fiddling with a water bottle and doing this gorilla style, I apologize. I have to, because whoo, it's hot. Anyway, we're talking about The Last of Us Part 1, the remake coming out, or the remaster, as the general toxic internet tends to label it as. I will be giving my overall opinion on some of these controversies and criticisms and debates, and seeing what I think and what is my personal opinion, and how I will proceed forward with the relevant information that we learned at Summer Games Fest. Now, first and foremost, there are people saying, oh, this game didn't need a remake. It's 9 years old. You can buy it right now with the remastered edition, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so let's tackle this point in particular right here with it doesn't deserve a remake. Now, Resident Evil, if we're talking about like time just lapsing, right? And I have to bring up RE because they are a focal point for remakes right now. The first Resident Evil, I know people will say, well, Resident Evil 1 had to be fixed when they remade it back in the day, and then they migrated it to new hardware on the GameCube. That was only one gen in between, and that took 6 years. So time is like out of the equation, right? Because you can remake a game from either 6 years out or 9 years out, make improvements, and it still could be considered a remake, right? So time doesn't factor. I would agree that if it was a game from 10 to 20 years ago or something like that, a longer lapse like RE4 remake, cool, you know, that's fine. A longer lapse of time will allow them to fix most of the problems from the original and pinpoint, you know, exactly what went wrong. And I think games that weren't good in the past, like DMC2, those games also deserve to be remade. That being said, I played the first Last of Us, and I could tell you there were frame drops before remastered. There's still issues in remastered, like bugs. I had a lot of bugs. And there's still the issue of the AI not being smart. That is like a few critical things they could fix for this remake that the original and the remastered version could not fix at all. I'm just saying in general, like, you gotta think about this stuff logically. You gotta think about this stuff critically. Then there's people saying that, well, you know, it's simply remaster, trying to devalue. Once again, a remaster, in my definition, is them taking the old source code and trying to sort of rework it and retrofit it to make it playable yet again on modern platforms. Whether it's a resolution bump like 60 FPS, it's like really the bare minimum. And I think that sort of principle is what people are trying to use to attack this game. I think that if this game does not have, once again, it goes back to the previous point, if it has new features that were prevalent in part 2 that were never in The Last of Us Remastered or the original, like exploding arrows, which is something that was not in the original. They got speed run mode, which is new, but I mean, speed running modes are minuscule timers, but they really do help people who like to go through this game in the quickest way possible. Modernized controls, better combat, better AI. The original did not have good AI. I've seen people run into walls. I've been there. I've played the game. I know. Accessibility options, which will help people play this game who are disabled, which is cool. I'm all for that. I'm all down for that. The more players, the better. And that is a great thing. The first one did not have, if had any, accessibility options at all. Just changing around the triggers to be what you prefer when you shoot someone in the face. Yeah, that's important. That's something that wasn't in the original. And enhance exploring, along with the more realistic graphics and more detailed face models, which will help the characters in the gameplay aspect. I'm not saying that The Last of Us, the original, didn't look good in those pre-rendered cutscenes, but as Anthony Caliber has said, in the gameplay, it's a little bit of a different story, so I assume the models will look even better there as well. They are expanding upon things that were not in the remaster. This is like common sense, right? The remaster is taking the old code, but that old game rarely changes. The old game rarely changes and is more minute than remaking it from the ground up to fit new features. I think that there needs to be an example. Like, remake is to make something again or differently. Look at that. Look at that right there. I'm just pausing right there so you get it. To make something again or differently. Right? So you can make the same game and make it different, but you could also make it again, make it incremental and a little better, and it passes as a remake. I mean, they call it a 1-for-1 remake, which is not compromising the original too much. You're just adding in some quality of life to make it, you know, oh so better. And features from part 2, like I said, completely new, was never in the original at all. And then there's the reimagining, which is what people prefer for Resident Evil, which is to make the game from the ground up and to change the cutscenes. Now, as far as I know, for The Last of Us Part 1, they aren't changing the cutscenes or voice work, but they are updating everything else with the features I just listed a couple of seconds ago. With RE, they change everything mechanically. It's basically like a completely new game. The problem with the reimaginings is that people have complained about cut content. Things from the original being lost in translation. Like, I don't know. What is it? The moth, crows, stuff like that. A lot of cuts in RE3 Remake. So, reimaginings, they have their own problems. And honestly, it's good that they're not cutting out anything for the core story of the main campaign centered on The Last of Us, or Left Behind for that reason. We lose nothing in translation. A good example of a 1-for-1 is actually, I would say, no, not even Mega Man Maverick Hunter X, but the gameplay is. That's like 1-for-1. Nothing really too significant changes, and they do add violin as well. So that was a previous example, but yeah. Who is this remake for? I think this is for people who want to re-experience part 1 yet again under a new lens, and for people who enjoyed part 2's gameplay and they want to see it migrated over to part 1. So it's kind of like Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes, which, I mean, a lot of people hate that game too, but I honestly liked it. I like some of the things that it tried to do. Next up, I had a point here saying we need to see more gameplay with the marketing. I agree, because if you're taking pre-rendered cutscenes and pitting them against new ones, then obviously the old game still is going to look good, and the remake still is going to look superb with the more realistic facial expressions, right? You know, so but you need gameplay in this regard. I think you need it because once again, we want to see all this revolutionary built from the ground up stuff work in sync. And I don't think the in-game models from the original, oh man, those looked pretty bad. In this new one, I think they will look astronomically better, but it remains to be seen. So yes, more gameplay would be nice. Why does Tess look so bad compared to the original? All right, so beauty is in the eye of the beholder. It is a video game. It is a pixel, so it does nothing for me personally. For other people, it might. I feel like it is nothing wrong when they decide to alter a model to be either A, age appropriate to how they were written, or B, either update that model to fit the scope of the theme. And the theme of The Last of Us is this is post-apocalyptic. People eat out of cans. Canned bacon for a living, right? They have no water, no food, always stressed, chased by monsters every singular second. This is more of a grounded sort of aesthetic. Therefore, you know, you could talk about art style until the cows come home, but this is what they're going for. This is not out of place for Tess to look age appropriate if she was aged up, you know, to basically look her age and be almost close to how old Joel is, apparently, and it matches the original actress as well from what I heard. So there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I expect post-apocalyptic people to look grungy. I expect them to look dirty. I expect them to look like they haven't slept in days because they are that pressed to survive in this world. So I have no problems with characters looking like this, looking this weary, having white hairs, etc., because that fits the theme of the world. If I were to see someone glammed up, like she was being like she was in a fucking beauty pageant with lipstick on and everything in a post-apocalyptic world, I would laugh at that because that is not realistic to me. I seen the age appropriate thing before with Spider-Man. The original guy, John Bubanach, whatever his name is, he just looked too old to be Peter. Peter's only like 23 in Insomniac Spider-Man, so them using someone who looks younger made sense. Age appropriate characters getting a facelift, or characters looking like they just came out of hell in a post-apocalyptic world, and I wish that horn outside would shut the fuck up while I'm recording a video. I'm leaving that in. Anyway, cutting factions out of part 1 and selling you the game for 70 bones. I don't like that. I'm gonna be honest. I don't like the fact that the multiplayer got cut. They could have remade that too, and I think with all intents and purposes it would have been fine if they did. However, I do understand why. I do get it. I get why the multiplayer is not in, because part 2's multiplayer, and we're going to talk about factions part 2, that looks and sounds like it's going to be amazing. I know it's a screenshot, but it sounds like it's going to be amazing. It sounds like it's going to be bigger in scope, bigger city. It's going to have a story-like presentation and story-like multiplayer for the first time in history. If they add in more feature-rich modes, like Horde mode, where you're fighting the clickers with a buddy, things like that, this is gonna be huge. Like, I'm not going to go back and replay Factions Part 1 if Part 2 comes out and it's a bigger and better experience. I'm gonna be on that Part 2 life for a while now, and then I'll go back to Factions Part 1 if I feel nostalgic to pop in my Last of Us Remastered disc and play that multiplayer there. Like, people talk about, oh, we lost things in migration, but you can play Factions Part 1 right now if you're a Last of Us fan. Right now. Get that remastered disc, pop it in, go play. So I didn't lose anything. What have I lost outside of the multiplayer being remade and getting a new multiplayer that might be better? Nothing. Next up, let's see here. Let's see. Oh, and I remember people complained about Aloy as well, her face, and I'm like, post-apocalyptic setting. They didn't understand that women grow hair on their face, peach fuzz. That was just funny too. Oh, let's see. The big point of contention, selling this remake at 70 bones. Ooh, oh boy, that's a spicy meatball. That's a spicy plot point. Let's see. Say plot point. I mean price point. It is a plot though behind it, because obviously every company exists to make a sale, but $70 is the norm nowadays. That's like the norm. That's the standard. And people said, oh, we complained about Demon Souls being $70, but it's not shocking because they sold a remake at $70 before. Sony, you know, sold that, and then it's not out of the norm for games to be $70 on other platforms. I think now Final Fantasy Remake on Steam is $70. They just have a token to get the game at like $50, but that base price is $70 on PC. That's a remake for $70. I can't be too shocked by this. Of course, you have the element of people saying you shouldn't buy this, you should buy this, etc. I'm like, people can do whatever they want with their money. It is their money. If you don't like something, you are inclined not to buy it. You don't have to buy anything you don't want to. Now, I think it's weird if someone says, I'm not buying something, and they complain about it 20 to 30 different times. Like, we get it, we heard you, all right? I heard you, I get it. I'm not getting X, Y, and Z, so don't get X, Y, and Z at launch, otherwise I'm gonna think you're frauding. And then people could buy whatever they please if it makes them happy. That is the fruits of your labor. That is the value of your dollar. If you buy this game at $70, you're not stupid. I think people like to basically watch other people's pockets and what they're buying, and they're not minding their business, which is one of the lamest things of all time. Like, if someone buys a game, how does it hurt you or affect you other than, you know, some industries going in certain directions? That's the only like logical point, is that they could see it and go in this direction, but once again, it doesn't really matter because they already have gone in the direction of making Demon Souls remake $70 before Last of Us remake, which is $70. So yeah, when things become normal and price points become normal and sequels and remasters are going to be priced at $70, you can either wait for a sale, you have your options, you can wait for a sale, or just, you know, not buy it entirely. That's how I feel about that. It's the value of $1, and your entertainment is subjective at the end of the day. Also, you can't use the argument of, oh, this sells for 0 cents anymore if the Firefly edition, which is like even more than $70, is like, what is it, 100? I forget, but that edition has sold out. People bought it. Supply and demand, as they say, and companies are going to do that. If there is a demand, there will be a supply, and I'm sure that version is going to be restocked yet again. Also, it's funny that people talk about anti-consumerism and the value of a dollar, but Final Fantasy Remake is going to be broken into 3 parts. The original game had all 3 discs. This does not, and people will be buying it for $200 in 3 parts, because I assume it's going to be like this. Final Fantasy Remake Part 1, $60. Rebirth, 70. The last part, 70. That's gonna stack up to like 200 or something dollars for essentially what could have been all one game, but they decided to change it. Now I know why they changed it, but it's still one of those things where it's like, yeah, but you know, I'm gonna get this anyway, right? So I don't go around and I don't moral police on money, because I am a gamer first and foremost, and I have interests. I can wait for things to drop on sale. I can buy things day one, and I can decide if I'm not going to buy a game, just like everyone else. I'm going to buy most of these games because I'm a fan of most of these games when I get a PS5. It's just a matter of when, where, why, and how. And that's just more content for me. That's going to benefit me in the long run, so I don't lose anything. I'm sorry. That's how I feel about it. Just a lot of things thrown around. Clearly, like I said, Factions Part 2 sounds amazing. Bigger scope, man. I'm going to be on that multiplayer. I feel like multiplayer right now is dry. Very dry. I either go back to Gears of War or I go back to Halo. So my multiplayer ventures on PlayStation has been minuscule at best. Therefore, I need to know about Factions Part 2 next year. I need that. Anyway, I think this remake is interesting. I like the gameplay of Part 2, and I think that incorporating that into Part 1 with no compromises is the best solution, but it is so crazy how people have tried to downplay everything. Like, I even heard people say, oh man, not much is too different, and then when they changed tests, it was like way too much is different. So I don't know. I think this franchise, in terms of the people who dislike it, they tend to, you know, be the first ones that are obvious to move the goalpost a lot, which is, I mean, just simply swear off the series and play your own franchises and you'll be fine. I think you'll be okay. I think we'll all live. Like, I lived when the DMC reboot came out and I really didn't like it, and I did not support it at launch, and I got it used for like literally $10. I played it, and then I actually discovered that I quite enjoyed it. So that's a lot of other experiences out there. Another man's trash is another man's treasure, as they say. And I'm still digging the Last of Us franchise. I really genuinely love this post-apocalyptic zombie feel. I'm going to review Part 2 hopefully later in the year. That's gonna be a good time as I swig on my water and try not to die in 96 degrees. And it's all about subjectivity, you know. I guarantee you that if you don't support something, a company will stop doing it. However, that being said, if people support it, if it turns normal, then you gotta adapt with the times. Games will continue to be $70 from this point onward. The good news is, though, that PlayStation exclusive games, they go on sale a lot. So even if you're not getting The Last of Us Remake at $70, but you are morbidly curious down the road, then it's gonna be on sale probably like a year or two out. And another great thing is that this game, this franchise, is finally coming to PC, which has never been done before. I don't know if you can emulate The Last of Us, the first one, on the PS3 emulator, but this series has never been on PC, so there's going to be a whole other demographic that never played this game at all. And it's a lot to take into consideration there before calling stuff worthless and saying that, oh man, people aren't going to be so interested in this and I'm going to stomp my feet. Like, let the game come out and let the game speak for itself, as opposed to a lot of, you know, online yelling and then stuff just sells well. And if that happens, if that instance happens where a game I hate doesn't really, you know, fail, then it's like, oh well, on to the next thing that I could talk about. That's how I feel about it. Like, I don't dwell on hatred anymore because it's not healthy. It's not, and I feel like it's not healthy for a lot of people out there. I seen a funny debate, and it goes back to bad faith arguments. The bad faith argument is the fact that people don't believe that Final Fantasy VII as a series has not been milked to death by the publisher Square Enix, releasing even more games than the Last of Us series. And I thought that was quite hilarious because there is that sort of confirmation bias that folks will have. It's trying to state that, oh, this does not happen to my favorite franchise, but unfortunately for you, I am a fan of Final Fantasy VII, and I know they have released a ton of games in this small little subgenre for years, like 25 years worth of titles and characters crossing over into other games, seeing Cloud like often. They definitely milk Final Fantasy VII in this series, you know, to the point where you can even say it's undeserving that games like Final Fantasy VI are overshadowed by Final Fantasy VII. Sometimes you got to be real with yourself in these arguments, and that's just like one of the funny bits that I wanted to mention. I think that the gameplay improvements for Last of Us could benefit, but that was the lowest totem for me, was the fact that the bugs in the AI sort of hampered my experience. So I'm quite happy that they are fixing the AI, and they can improve sections like the dam where you're fighting all those snipers and it's like, bandits, don't let them into the building, and it's sniper fire galore and your ass is being shot off and there's no cover. Yeah, prone and diving and all that and swing to the side, that can help that section out really, really fantastically. And then I guess the part where you're in Bill's town and Bill has to fight like all those clickers on Grounded and he can get grabbed. It's very annoying. You can get grabbed, you could die. Ooh, I think proning and tall grass will be totally fine there to help out the player and aid them in that situation. There's probably more that I can think of, but I don't want to ramble and keep this video on for way too long. I just need to see how all this stuff is implemented before I make the final decision to pick up the game, but I'm fairly optimistic about the entire experience. Stop making claims that this, that, and the third is being milked if your favorite love or your favorite IP is also being readily milked as well. Be honest about it and just say, hey, the value of $1 is relative to the observer, and that's all you have to say, instead of making up all this weird fairyland bullshit. Right. All right, so we're signing off. This is Renegade Operative here, and hopefully you guys enjoyed my thoughts on The Last of Us Part 1, the remake. Tell me what you thought in the comment section below, and we'll get into it. Until then, I'm on to the next video, which is going to be probably talking about the Resident Evil 8 timeline jump with the Rose DLC, and that's going to be fairly interesting to do. I will bid you guys adieu. Bang bang. I'll see you later.